Hello everyone, and welcome to TBR's webinar, Redefining the Carrier Cloud, a Market Forecast View, with TBR Executive Analyst Michael Sullivan-Trainor. I'm Justin Surgeon, I'm hosting today's session. Global carriers pursuing cloud services markets, including consumer and enterprise, have yet to gain traction, causing some carriers to reposition their cloud services and others to emphasize network enablement of competitors' platforms. In this webinar, Michael will cover the drivers behind these trends and present a market size prediction and forecast based on these factors. Carriers covered in this presentation will include AT&T, BT, CenturyLink, China Telecom, China Unicom, Orange, Telefonica, Telstra, Verizon, and Vodafone. Additionally, if you have any other questions about or would like to learn more about our carrier cloud research here at TBR, please reach out to myself or Michael after the presentation. Now, before we begin, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we will be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the previous presentations we've posted. Second, Michael will accept questions from the audience. Please send them through the Q&A function, and we will address as many as we can at the end of the presentation. And finally, we will be following up with you all with the slides from today's webinar, as well as a recording link within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. I encourage you to visit our YouTube and SlideShare pages as well, and I will send those links through the chat function. Now let me introduce the analyst presenting today. Michael Sullivan-Trainor is an executive analyst in TBR's Telecom practice, where he oversees TBR's Telecom practice portfolio, including the NFV portfolio, 5G portfolio, CAPEX and OPEX forecasts, operator metrics, and vendor and operator benchmarks. Michael leverages his 25 years of experience in the telecom industry to provide thought leadership and insights in syndicated and project work. Michael is also the lead author of TBR's Carrier Cloud Market Forecast. And with that, let me hand this over to Michael.
Thanks very much, Justin, and welcome to the webinar. This is the second Carrier Cloud webinar we've done. We did one back in December, so this represents a 6-month update, but as you'll hear in the webinar, there's been a lot of different directions and strategy for carriers with regard to cloud, even evident in the last 6 months that are, for us, indicate some long-term directions that have inspired us to apply some quantitative measures to forecast some investments that are going on, some revenue that's being achieved in carrier cloud, and some positioning for both the carriers and suppliers in the market. So in this webinar, we'll talk about what some of the key trends are that are driving the carrier cloud right now and pointing towards its redefinition. We'll highlight the total amount of revenue we expect carriers to be achieving from their cloud deployments over the next 5 years. We'll look at who some of the market leaders are from an operator standpoint and from a supplier standpoint. We'll talk about the very meaningful impact coming along for NFV and SDN into the carrier cloud service offer and infrastructure. And then we'll talk about some of the operators themselves who are positioned in different geographic areas and different investment areas, similarly for the supplier positioning. And last, we'll highlight some of the our emerging quantitative findings around what all this means for the opportunity for suppliers to acquire revenue by selling into the carrier market. So with that, we'll get started. The first set of trends that we wanted to highlight for the carrier cloud are the following. We see a priority shift where a greater emphasis is being placed on the role of the carrier and, in fact, the carrier's network as an on-ramp to the cloud. This is largely to facilitate the request of many of the carrier's customers to have access to a cloud of their choice. So while the carrier may, in fact, be offering a full suite of cloud services and a way to build a partnership with a public cloud provider or even a hybrid cloud offer, increasingly there is an adjacent opportunity to the customer saying, I would just like you, the carrier, to give me access over your network to a public cloud, generally one of the more popular public clouds, an Amazon or a Google. And the carriers have begun not only to comply with this, but to deliver very secure and reliable on-ramps, service offers that tie the network to the relationships with the cloud provider, either by doing a direct connect to the cloud provider's data center, staging some of the network infrastructure in the cloud's data center, or increasingly moving to more of a logical view of an end-to-end carrier network to public provider cloud infrastructure, all leading to a better experience for the customer to access public cloud and offer more exposure for the operator to the enterprise in the cloud market. We'll talk a little bit more specifically about the impact on the business model that this entails, but that's definitely a priority shift that we've seen in recent months. Secondly, there's the beginning of a repositioning of cloud in general, the concept of cloud models and cloud service delivery, really a cross-pollination of all that cloud means to the internal aspect of carrier infrastructure itself. I would say there's also more of a movement of the kinds of services a carrier typically provides, unified communication services, customer experience advantage services, quality of service capabilities. They're migrating to what used to be thought of as sort of separate cloud data center functions. So that upscaling of cloud functions with perhaps some of the carrier unique delivery features or services. So a merger or transformation of the network within the carrier that both enables an improved cloud offer and also enables the network itself generally for the carrier to be upgraded to more of a cloud service delivery model. And we'll highlight that trend as well and what that means for business models. And last but not least, carriers still maintain robust investments in their customer base penetration to gain more traditional cloud revenue from the enterprises and to an increasing extent SMBs across various markets, and they're doing that through the traditional means of expanding data center footprint, acquiring partners that have or the companies that can increase the footprint or service capability, or continuing just to sell into the installed base. And we believe by that measure, that initiative, they are following a trend that is broadly held, we believe, in the cloud industry. That is, there is a continued growth and adoption of cloud within enterprise customer, within SMB, as cloud is perceived to be more capable and some of the complexity issues continue to be resolved, some of the business models continue to be improved. The appetite for cloud services continues to be strong and growing among IT organizations. And so there's a natural migration of and continued penetration of those organizations by carriers as cloud players across their global footprints. And let me just pause here to say that the carrier cloud market, the way we're defining it is these are global operators that have a footprint across multiple geographies, both of the network services, the data center, and then most of them have implemented increasingly layers of cloud services in their data center footprint, and even built dedicated cloud-oriented infrastructure. We track the top 10 to 15 of these companies. There aren't that many, actually, that can project a global footprint, and the competition is very significant across region and within region. That's a different market and a smaller market than the total cloud market. Certainly the revenue, as you'll see, that these companies achieve is dwarfed by what Amazon or Google or the other large public cloud providers acquire for revenue. And we believe a lot of the play for operators after some early years, another redefinition step, as I mentioned earlier, is to move away from trying to compete on that stage for the purely commodity public cloud revenue and really cater more to hybrid and private cloud that can leverage with much more value the operator network and operator value proposition. So we look at carrier cloud across these dimensions. What is the nature of the portfolio? Everything from the compute and storage as a service to the security elements, to vertical elements of the portfolio, unified communication, security. The stack has really been growing for carriers to have a broad portfolio that takes more and more of the traditional hosting and enterprise services and delivers them as a service in a cloud model with a significant amount of services, professional services surround for the large enterprises in particular. We track the acquisition and partner movement going on for carriers. We've seen early stage very large acquisitions for gaining footprint, and now we see a period, at least over the last several months, of a quieting of some of the major acquisitions. For the most part, there have been some exceptions in some of the European markets and some of the Asian markets. But over time, a consolidation rather than an aggressive acquisition strategy, continued data center investment, and as we've been highlighting already so far, an evolution of strategy. And I would really want to emphasize one of the key takeaways here is we believe this is solidifying of carrier cloud strategy in a way that hasn't happened for some time, because we believe the carriers have been trying to find their way in the strategy regarding cloud, again, not being fully understanding whether they should compete in the public cloud space, whether or not they can really leverage their networks. We see the strategy coming together where they can make some decisions around those parameters. A little bit of that then in terms of the progress over time. As I mentioned, the demand for customers was first seen by carriers as a negative. It's just no one wanted my cloud, so to speak. If it wasn't Google or Amazon or another public cloud, then they didn't want the public cloud being offered by the carrier. There are exceptions in national markets, but by and large, globally, it has been a case of more advantageous to provide the on-ramp to the public cloud than to become a public cloud provider aggressively or exclusively on the carrier's part. And we believe that the latter part of 2014, those light bulbs really went on, and there was a big shift in strategy towards the on-ramp model. Simultaneously, though, there is not a giving up on the ability of a unique cloud offer that can be hybrid, particularly catering to enterprises that want a quality of service mix for some workloads with a lesser quality of service, shall we put it that way, for accessing some of the economies of scale and cost value of the public cloud, so the advent of hybrid clouds. And we believe the carrier has a very strong position sitting squarely as a hybrid cloud provider, being able to offer that mix with a variety now of on-ramp partnerships to bring in on one hand, and a significant private cloud business that can be addressing some of the mission-critical requirements of the enterprise on the other hand. And then as we highlighted, the growth through acquisition was prevalent by some of the leading carriers. We believe that's calming down a little bit. We're certainly seeing a lot of pressure on the economics of service providers globally, and that makes acquisitions a little bit more difficult in discrete areas like cloud. Some of the acquisition attention is going to much larger business-changing acquisitions, and otherwise much more expectation that cloud's going to be less of a build matter and more of a revenue generation and profitability matter going forward. So we see towards that end really trying to release a broader set of portfolio, moving deeper into security, moving deeper into verticals, moving deeper into the quality of service offers, trying to strengthen the professional services around cloud offers. So much of this being enterprise focused. Some carriers are also simultaneously trying to automate and make the cloud much more self-service across the network for the small business. And so that's another direction. We also see in 2015 the advent of IoT, or M2M extended into IoT for different vertical segmentations with a cloud-flavored platform. So a carrier is actually bringing a couple of things to an IoT environment, not only the platform for converging and aggregating the data for IoT, but also then layering services on top that can be delivered as a service in a cloud model. So the cloud business comes into play in the growth of IoT in the enterprise as another flavor. So this is very important because we think that the first instance of cloud for an enterprise is to look at internal workloads and say, what can we bring to move to cloud for economies of scale or of economics? And then that's an ongoing migration we see. Parallel to that is essentially a new opportunity to either bring new efficiencies to the ecosystem or open up a brand new ecosystem to IoT. So suddenly carriers are in the middle of two major enterprise requirements, the growth of IoT and the continued migration of workloads to cloud. And we believe that's going to maintain a lot of traction for them and does turn the attention increasingly toward more of a private or hybrid solution to accomplish that. So we believe that is sort of a coalescing of the external offer strategy for carriers offering cloud at this point. And then the last point in 2018 we'll highlight a little bit more deeply is that's not all. Not only have they now found a sweet spot of penetration in carrier enterprise migration to cloud, but they've also got in the IoT, they've also got a new way in which they can convert their own infrastructures to deliver all this much more efficiently and offer more of the network capability out into the cloud marketplace for enterprises and SMBs. So we believe that's the story moving forward towards 2018. We see this trend happening very powerfully across all regions. Initially, it appeared that it was more aggressive, perhaps in the United States or in areas of Western Europe. Certainly the history of developing cloud services for carriers has been older, stronger with some of those carriers. But the Asian market has really picked up steam. A lot of leveraging the access that international companies need to the Asia market through extended cloud services is a strong story for the China operators and some of the Asia Pac operators. We see growth of cloud services in India. There's just an irresistible value that the operator can provide, the carrier can provide to offering cloud services and a coincident interest in gaining the economies and the network quality coming out of the enterprises, increasingly the self-service options coming out of the SMB. So regionally distributed with a very interesting competition where traditionally we look at the service provider market and see, generally speaking, less multinational competition. Wireless footprints tend to live in national or at least regional multinational arenas. However, the carrier cloud is more of a battle of data center footprint. And data center footprint tied to multinational networks spans the globe for the large carriers that we're looking at. So it's a different kind of competition for the carriers who may be more used to focusing on their region, one region only, or they're in a national market. This is definitely multi-region. We see significant play of North American players in APAC and Europe, and vice versa, APAC and European players in North America, and everybody else, everybody competing in the European market. So while the regional player may have, regional domestic may have strength or larger market share along with 2 or 3 peers, there's definitely a threat always of the new entrants or the smaller projection of a player from another region gaining ground in that market and growing share. And in fact, that's one of the ways in which not only do you have regional penetration and growth within the domestic market, you also have penetration and growth essentially taking share away from others in the adjacent regional market. So a very interesting, vibrant competition where regional requirements differ, localization issues become key factors, and the ability then to deliver a set of cloud services not only catered to the mission criticality of the type of user or the international or multinational, but also then some of the localization requirements for vertical applications and so on. So there's a lot of levers a carrier can put into play to be successful here against sort of the generic cloud player or the cloud player that's offering a commodity service. And we believe there's another reason why there's good traction and good future for carrier cloud. That brings us to our forecast. So our forecast at this point is looking at a growth roughly 4.7, so slightly under $5 billion being required for carriers in the coming off of 2014 into 2015. This is documented as we track what we name there as the largest global carriers, the top 10 to 15 carriers who are having a global footprint and having a significant scale in that footprint. And then we also include in this a rest of market. There is a smaller set of carriers that have perhaps not a global footprint, but have a sub-regional, multi-region, but it might not address the same scale as the largest global carriers. So we add a rest of market view there, and that gives us a total. We are tracking the revenue across as a outcome of an enterprise services business usually that has a carrier cloud component as what many carriers call strategic services, as a subset of strategic services that is cloud, and the cloud services are comprised of the storage revenue, the compute revenue, the vertical revenue, the security revenue, the UCaaS revenue, whatever revenue is derived from offering a service as a cloud, as well as the professional services. And so we have the growth here of global carrier revenue ramping up significantly, going from $4.7 billion in 2014, a steady rate, a double-digit growth rate, 16% CAGR at this point, getting to nearly $12 billion by the end of the forecast period, and we don't expect it to finish there. And the reasons for this, as I've indicated already, are their number one position as already in the flow of the migration of the enterprises and SMBs to cloud, increasingly amounts of workload being migrated to cloud. In addition, some breakthroughs we believe is going to happen later in the forecast period where more mission-critical applications, mission-critical workload will be moving to cloud as more and more of the conservatism around that, the concerns around quality of service, the concerns around security are resolved, and there's more reliability in the carrier cloud. And we particularly point to the carrier cloud. We believe the carriers are going to be, are at the forefront of solving the problems that we do see crop up around security and around reliability that are the attributes of some of the other cloud providers that specialize more in public cloud. So being able to move along that, opening the door for mission critical, for hybrid cloud, for private cloud, we believe that's a major revenue driver for carriers that they're clearly on task to address. Another driver is going to be the ability to offer that access to the public cloud as an on-ramp. That second strategy we talked about, a smart shift away from trying to be basically struggling in the public cloud market, and instead using that as a partnership that's going to have a halo effect on their revenue and relationship with the enterprises. Thirdly, it's IoT. It's offering cloud across new kinds of service types that go beyond just the migration of the workloads, but that create new customer relationship opportunities, new revenue opportunities, new efficiencies with the various verticals of the IoT marketplace that really do require a strong combination of network integration and cloud service delivery. So that IoT flavor here of cloud is going to be quite valuable. And then the third revenue driver is going to be how the carriers are able to convert their own infrastructures and leverage their own capability to field customer experience management services, quality of service, most of which driven by a strong play of analytics, but in a much more agile, faster time to market approach. So there'll be an ability to onboard new services for enterprises that have a cloud delivery model, new services for the IoT market, and we think even some traction SMBs and perhaps consumers in this way. So trends point to a number of factors that despite the dominance of other players in the public cloud, in the market that we see the carriers pursuing, there's some unique capabilities that are going to drive this revenue. So given that, who are some of the players that are succeeding in the market so far, and how do we expect that shift over time? As of this point, coming off of our analysis of 2014, and incidentally we'll be publishing fairly soon our next generation as well as this forecast later in the year on carrier cloud, what we've observed so far is by virtue of acquisition largely and data center expansion, NTT has made the most significant investment in garnering, therefore, the most significant revenue on a quarterly basis in carrier cloud marketplace across. And here we're seeing more, still largely the compute and storage as a foundation, and then we're seeing some of the unified communications, vertical applications, and security applications. We're not yet seeing, as you might imagine, significant revenue contribution from IoT. We're not yet seeing significant revenue or business model contribution or conversion from NFV-SDN. And we expect those flavors are going to add to this picture. Right now, it's more thinking about that leg of the stool that's more of a traditional penetration story. And we also don't think the penetration rate has achieved its maximum velocity either in the enterprise. So all that goes to say revenue is relatively small, early stage revenue for carriers in cloud. And that's what we're showing here. And it doesn't take a lot then to become a larger player than some of the peers. It just takes acquiring a footprint from another multinational player or requiring bulking up a data center investment or opening up a new application front. So a lot of these things can bring significant incremental revenue that in a small revenue market has quite an impact. So we see there NTT and Deutsche Telekom being among those, moving into strongly acquisition mode or private cloud-focused approaches. Then we have activity increasingly in China Telecom. The Chinese market has really opened up to address cloud more aggressively in the last, latter half of 2014. And we see the positioning of the U.S. players, AT&T and Verizon, historically in this market, going through a bit of a redirect with the advent of the decision to shift away from public to on-ramp, but still very strongly pursuing private cloud and moving along the curve of IoT and NFV. And then strong European players, Vodafone, Orange, BT, Telefonica, coming into the market and growing their revenue, or they've long been in the market, put it that way. They continue to expand their revenue, expand their footprint, and expand their portfolio of services. So that collection of European players plays strong here on a multinational basis as well. And then we see Bharti, the Indian market, beginning to show some revenue growth as well. Just a little bit more highlighting some of the strategies. So NTT's really taken a holistic approach. It's one of the few carriers that took upon cloud not as a sideline, but as a centerpiece in how the company was going to go forward in a multinational sense, acquiring multinational properties, not in the domestic market, but in other regions, in the European theater, in the North American theater, leveraging a strong APAC presence. So really attacking this as a multinational growth investment and offering a full portfolio of services upon the cloud infrastructure upon the data center footprint that has been acquired, and that's been a strong ramp for NTT and continues to be significant in terms of their growth. Deutsche Telekom is a little bit different. Deutsche Telekom's actually gone, in our view, a little bit deeper while leveraging T-Systems and its ability to offer enterprise cloud services through a multinational footprint, also looking at tighter deployment in markets such as the SMB market to try and extend its penetration in European market and other areas. So a little bit less trying to capture the world, as NTT is a little bit more focused in some of its core markets closer to home. And then we already mentioned China Telecom. Not only is it trying to move up the curve and moving domestic enterprises and enterprises that are touched in the China market, it's begun some international expansion, but most importantly has achieved good traction from its position as a hub for multinational business towards the Asian market. Now, I want to pause from the carrier cloud discussion exclusively and turn to that leg of the stool that's affected by NFV-SDN. Why NFV-SDN discussion in carrier cloud? Well, we have seen that carriers are doing two things. They are, of course, taking the learnings from cloud infrastructure and moving them into their network infrastructure, so they can create things like enterprise services on demand, carrier internet services on demand, virtual CPE, and so on, that very much offer network as a service as a flavor of their business. In addition to that, we're seeing some repurposing of the cloud investment, some reuse of excess capacity in cloud data centers towards internal applications. So there is a significant movement to merge the infrastructure of the carriers, their cloud and data center platforms, with the shift towards a more cloud-oriented, or NFV-SDN to be specific, oriented infrastructure that's going to create a stronger, we believe, ability to integrate the services that carriers traditionally deliver over cloud. And that's going to let them leverage analytics more effectively, leverage customer experience more effectively, and offer solutions that address that mission-critical need of enterprises on the cloud more effectively, leveraging an integrated network and data center and cloud platform solution in a way that hasn't had the kind of scale they've had thus far. We believe one of the reasons for that, too, is carriers have kind of kept cloud as its own side business somewhere underneath their enterprise services business, and we believe the movement of NFV and SDN naturally brings that infrastructure out of that sort of siloed approach. It breaks down some of the silo, and that's going to simply add traction, volume, marketing leverage, a bunch of things to the carrier. Cloud business becomes the carrier business to a great extent. That said, what does it mean for their investment? So that's what we're showing here. We're showing CapEx spend for NFV and SDN, and we're seeing it's a smallish relative to the $300 billion plus CapEx that carriers traditionally spend, but it's growing aggressively and will continue to grow aggressively in stepwise fashion well past 2018. So that's very important for the suppliers. Very important for the carriers, too. This is one of the places where the clouds are. The cloud investment is parallel now to an internal infrastructure investment, and perhaps where some of what used to be the external cloud investment is going, at least for the interim, to try and move the internal infrastructure to be more capable of delivering cloud service. So we feel like there's a profound change for the future that also will contribute to the revenue and value of carriers as they deliver cloud services. Just to highlight a little bit more on the adoption, what we see for NFV, we're definitely in, not even reached fully the early adopter stage. I believe 2015, moving from proof of concept and early implementations to an early adopter phase that we're going to see next year. where there'll be significant Tier 1 carrier deployment of NFV and SDN, ramping up over the next couple of years to an early majority. So the time clock, if you're forecasting when the wave of internal infrastructure, efficiency, agility, and service value actually manifests in the carrier cloud market, I'm expecting it's going to take another couple of years. So that is a longer-term strategic initiative that will have great value, but it will not have impact in the short term. In the short term, we are still looking at hybrid, the cloud stack that's being built, places where footprint is being grown, and the steady penetration map, as well as IoT, although IoT is probably also going to take a bit of time to manifest any significant revenue for carriers on the cloud side. So with all that, let's look a little bit more closely at some of the folks that we cover when we talk about carrier cloud. Here we are highlighting positioning. This is not carrier cloud. This is NFV positioning. However, it is no coincidence that the carriers who are strongly positioned in NFV also tend to be the global carriers addressing cloud. The value propositions, the synergies, the strengthening of the cloud services align so strongly with NFV and SDN that the correlation between these two types of operators, these two types of carriers, is extremely strong. And so we see the AT&Ts and Verizons, CenturyLink, which has made its position at least as much about SDN and cloud as it has about broadband access. Telefonica, which has turned over a significant focus of its business to an internal initiative for NFV SDN, which is going to have an effect on its external cloud business down the road. Deutsche Telecom and NTT are there. The Chinese players are there. Coming up more quickly, more strongly are the European players. We expect Vodafone to be more strongly placed here in the future. And BT, of course, and Orange, for right now, is represented by France Telecom, but clearly Orange has a strong position in both moving forward on rate of adoption of NFV and in cloud. So then let's look at the positioning of some of the suppliers. Some of the suppliers addressing this marketplace include the three that have been, well, for lack of a better word, dominant in positioning in the carrier cloud by virtue of a strong position already in the data center of the carrier, and that is IBM, Cisco, and HP. It is no coincidence that IBM, Cisco, and HP have each also brought forth their own cloud services, developed strong carrier alliances for cloud, the Cisco Intercloud, HP carrier alliances, and IBM working very closely with the carriers to make an answer to the enterprise request and movement towards increasing amount of workload in the cloud by a combination of working closely with the carriers and their networks as well as with their own data center infrastructure. The data center infrastructure that the carriers purchase and implement in their own cloud data centers is also a key part of that, and that's really what we're highlighting here. EMC and VMware, of course, have been an integral part of that, although they're slightly differentiated as the areas they play have been traditionally more domain-specific, although we believe that may be changing, becoming more broad, especially as cloud becomes more defined by a more flexible set of architectures than was being sort of a proprietary approach that the Cisco's and IBM's have brought in the past. Oracle, SAP coming on strong. Microsoft with Azure kind of sits there with a potential, but tends to be more of a partner public cloud play than a big player in the private cloud, although there's potential there. Interestingly, the OEMs to the operators, the Ericssons, Alcatel-Lucents, the Nokias, are suddenly knocking on the door of carrier cloud in a way that they had not done before. We know, for instance, observe the introduction of the hardware platforms from Ericsson and Nokia, the continued promotion of SDN and NFV platforms from Alcatel-Lucent, really strengthening something that is carrier unique, that's going to form a strong environment around which to build new cloud services in this integrated fashion. So we see the OEMs as being, having a bit of an edge, as understanding how to do what may be next steps in the cloud environment with a full-blown carrier infrastructure in mind. Cisco, HP, and IBM are not ignorant of that, and they certainly have very strong initiatives as well. So down the road, if we were to do a 2x2 of the future carrier cloud circumstance that incorporates that leveraging of internal infrastructure, it may very well be a set of OEMs sitting alongside the HP, Cisco's, and IBM's with advances from EMC and others. Also want to mention Huawei. Huawei's become much stronger in its ability to deploy a full cloud set of offerings for carriers, and does get it the same way the other OEMs get it, that it's about a merged environment, not just about servicing an independent data center cloud over here and a carrier infrastructure over there. And so that's the key takeaway, I think, for suppliers, is to really understand this, not just what's been happening in data center service migration to cater to enterprise, but also understand what's been happening in internal carrier, is happening, will happen, internal carrier data center migration for network service to deliver the kinds of integrated applications and services that we think will add traction. And of course, everybody in this target group is all over delivering an IoT set of capabilities, platforms, support the network, support the analytics. So very tight competition among a set of around a dozen players here. And we believe the positioning is going to evolve, but everyone's going to be competing for a pretty common set of revenue across the carriers. So what is that revenue? We have here a look at a new initiative we're calling with cloud components. So here we are trying to understand, falling down from that revenue we saw being achieved by carriers with a stepwise growth in that revenue, understanding there's a parallel investment in NFV going on, but what about the investment in more of the traditional cloud components that go into the data center, similar to the kinds of components that an enterprise would acquire to deliver cloud services? This is our view of that market, and we've got some different kinds of research pieces coming out or continuing to be produced about that. So we see a total market there, and this is not just the global carriers. This is the total market for cloud solutions. And so we're the nearly $22 billion market in 2014, growing to about 12% growth, and a $38 billion market going down the road. The hardware is still significant in a converged infrastructure delivery system that includes a significant part of the revenue spend, but a relatively slow growth. We see much faster growth in the management environment for the suppliers. I think management on both sides of the fence, and true traditional cloud management integrated with the management of the network infrastructure is a key story going forward, as well as security. Management, security are probably the two places where we think the most investment needs to be, and that underlines the ability of not only the carrier to be able to do its own need for reliability of its network infrastructure, but to have a parallel migration of mission-critical services from the enterprise to carrier cloud really requires a strong set of deliverables around management and security for both the cloud environment and the network environment. We believe the operators are well after that, and then the suppliers, therefore, are well after pursuing that opportunity. So I believe we've reached the end of our major content. I just wanted to take a few minutes to highlight a little bit about the telecom practice where we house this research at TBR. For those that might not be familiar, we have a fuller portfolio where we focus on the, as you can see, we focus on the operators, we focus on the suppliers, and we focus on the technology trends, cloud being one of them, and at the 5G, small cells, really all aspects of carrier investment and operator investment. We split our vendor focus into what has been the equipment market, the software market, and the services market. Well, I will say the convergence of these markets is something that we're working with all the time. Operator research is extensive in terms of we look at the enterprise operators, which is where a lot of the carrier cloud business resides, the telecom operator holistically, wireless, wireline, and cable capabilities. And recently we have initiated an alternative network provider coverage. This is the Google, Amazon, and Wi-Fi first players who are delivering significant disruptive solutions toward the operator business model, both on the cloud front and on the communications services fronts. So that's a significant development we're tracking with our research as well. I won't go through this in detail. This is just a listing of some of the focus areas of the portfolio in the vendor area, the kinds of vendors we cover, the operators, some of the operators we cover, as well as some of the technologies we cover, which I've already mentioned. So with that, I would like to just highlight that the carrier cloud research itself has a couple of ways we look at it. We offer these webinars that offer a fuller view of the market, but we do track the activities of the carriers themselves in a benchmark. We are actively benchmarking revenue of the global carriers and carrier cloud. And we are launching a market forecast, the draft of which you have seen at a high level. We will be delivering that with a multi-segment approach, a geo view, as well as different portfolio elements as we can capture that and project that. And we will continue to track those market drivers, IoT, the mission-critical migration and traditional breadth of cloud services, as well as the leverage that can be achieved from the NFV. It's going to be very synergistic with how we are looking at the NFV and SDN markets, which also has a companion set of forecast landscape and eventually a benchmark as soon as real money is made in NFV. So with that, I've left a significant amount of time for questions. So I will turn it back over to Justin and see if we can broaden our discussion. Thanks very much for your time.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Michael. So just a reminder, if anybody has any questions, please send them to the Q&A function. And with that, let's begin. So first question, why partner with a cloud provider OpEx and not build a cloud platform CapEx?
Well, the global carriers we talk about have actually built cloud platforms, and they are more and more dedicated to private cloud solutions. I think the decision to partner for public cloud is in order to achieve a turn over some of the issues of low price business model to the public cloud provider and try and gain value simply from what the network always provides for value, and that is to say increase network services uptake, virtual private networks and so on, in which the carriers have always got a good margin and continue to get a good margin. So it's choosing to not be in the business of low margin commodity. That's for the global carrier to kind of parse those two views. A tier 2 certainly faces this question, and I think the desire to partner instead of build or buy a platform has a lot to do with time to market, has a lot to do with expertise. A lot of the traditional reasons you outsource something or work with a partner towards something. Also, they face the same issue the global carriers face, and that is most of the end customers want the well-known large-scale cloud environments that they see, that their customers want, that their internal users want, something catered to them by a carrier that might not have the same multinational reach or have a commonality across their businesses doesn't quite work for them. So that's why they would do that. I would just throw one more thought on that question. That is, I would ask the question back, does this strategic thinking change once a carrier has become more cloud-like itself? Won't it be easier to stand up a cloud platform once a carrier is converted to a full NFV-SDN infrastructure? I would argue that it would be easier, and therefore it's going to be a different cost equation for them to say, well, it won't be so onerous for them to invest in a cloud platform. It will be a natural part of the infrastructure, and therefore they may be more likely to offer their own cloud platform. That is a strong possibility we're considering as a strategic vector for NFV-SDN. Thanks for the question.
All right. Next question, and this is referring to slide 9. How much of this is net new business to the carriers versus being cannibalized from the incumbent cloud providers?
Majority is net new business by virtue of the migration of the workload. The key question that the key thought this question triggers, and I think it's a great question, is assuming there's an addressable market of new business coming on as the enterprises and even the SMBs begin to migrate more workload to cloud, whose business is it? Is it the cloud providers or is it the carriers? And I contend that there's going to be significant competition in play for the carriers to capture some of that business. It can't be assumed that the cloud providers are going to naturally obtain it, particularly if you create certain parameters around network quality and mission criticality. And even, and this is the concern I have about the carriers, is even the self-service and agile aspects, which have traditionally not been the strong suit of carriers, have been the strong suit of incumbent cloud providers, they can make a play for that, but it's going to take them a year or two to ramp up to get to that play. So that's a concern about whether or not they're going to get enough of time scale into that window to be competitive there. But certainly on the mission critical and network dependent traffic and workloads, there's going to be definitely a play for carriers that will prevent that market from becoming an incumbent cloud provider market.
All right. Next question. DT, per slide 11, has had successful penetration of their SMB marketplaces. Can you be more specific to the particular bundles or offerings that have had significant traction?
I will have to probably take an email and come back to you on that top of mind. It's about self-service. The interesting feature, the way I see the SMB market is, if you look at an enterprise and you say, okay, yes, they're going to move mission-critical applications. Well, what's mission-critical for SMBs? And it's the operational activities to run the business, the finance requirements, outsourcing financing, outsourcing supply chain, areas where SMBs have difficulty scaling up or bringing efficiencies. Those can be offered as easy application portals through the carrier. And so it's those kinds of traditional horizontal applications, so supply chain, sales management, and finance, where the traction lies. It's about making it easier and more cost-effective for them to do that as a carrier portal across some standard platforms than it is for them to onboard their own and work through their own challenges of making that happen in their environments. So that is generally the value. Specific examples of which products those are from DT, I will take if you want to offer us an email contact, we'll be able to come back to you on that.
All right, next question. What emerging vendors are making significant strides into the carrier, NFV, and cloud infrastructure market? And are any that are disrupting the traditional vendors as well?
Right now, I would say there's not as many that we see in the pure sort of carrier cloud market. We see more smaller vendors making disruption in the internal infrastructure market. Again, I'm not going to, there's actually a large number of vendors who are taking a stab at this. I don't see any of them with huge amount of revenue traction yet to significantly challenge. It's more carriers kicking the tires, giving them some opportunity to play in different parts of the environment, different levels of the stack. So I don't want to be specific on naming some names. Again, maybe take that offline, and I can provide some examples. There is a significant set of innovation going on, both in terms of how to improve the efficiency of cloud the carriers are interested in, as well as improve the efficiency of the network.
All right, the next question. Is the carrier cloud market forecast more of an IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS?
It's a combination of those plus added value that aren't simply about compute or development or software, maybe SaaS, maybe. But if you look at an opportunity like IoT that's a contributor to that, you've got a bit of a contribution of all three, though the compute can be heavy there for the sake of an analytics application. The SaaS may be significant there. So rather than, and I'm challenged by this and looking at this, I think it is not efficient to look at the market anymore as IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. I think those genericize things a little bit too much to the baseline, what's happening from a stack level. What's happening from a demand level is a much greater granularity to the type of application, the type of domain that's required here. And so different service drivers like IoT or mission-critical applications and different vertical applications can't simply be understood as one of those three flavors. They can include a combination of those, and so the market gets driven more by those kinds of cases than by the stack. I think that's an important strategic shift in thinking that's going on in carrier cloud right now, maybe even cloud in general.
All right, I think we have time for one or two more questions here. First, do you see any cloud service innovation in the 2015 to 2020 period?
Yes. 2015 to 2020 is huge. Significant cloud service innovation, more efficient delivery of cloud, better self-service tools, more efficient use of storage and analytics, an implementation then when we go out to 2020 of some of the ability to do some customer experience services related to helping the customer experience. The enterprises want to offer improvement in get that out to their end customers, but facilitate it because the carriers will deeply understand that and have a way to deliver that, as well as I've already mentioned, IoT. I think IoT is a hugely innovative area. And so there's multiple flavors of that to point to as requiring different mixes of network scale and quality of service and cloud scale and quality of service, and that's going to drive a lot of innovation.
All right, I think one last question we have time for here. Could you comment on the impact of open source to the carrier cloud market?
Very valuable, very high impact, but very difficult to manage as a time-to-market issue. Carriers, if I sit back and look at the cloud market in general, carriers appear to be slightly more open source averse overall than the general the general cloud provider market. and there's a lot of requirements around. One requirement that's traditionally true for carriers, I think carries over into this market, is they want the reliability and they need to tightly integrate the network, and it's harder to do that. The more moving parts you have, the less and less guarantee of quality of service there is, the harder it is for them to do that. And the other feature is they're a little bit less do-it-yourselfers. I think a lot of investment was made in the early stages of trying to build their own open source solutions, and some operators persist in that. But the majority that I talk to are much more interested in something prepackaged that can get them fast time to market. They see the cloud market moving fast. They see the need to change internal infrastructure moving fast, and if they don't get on top of it, they're not going to be successful. The learning curve for open source, although it's moving along, things like getting to carrier-grade OpenStack it's a slow migration. It's a lot of questions, and so there's mitigating factors there because the carriers don't have the time to build much of their own open systems approaches. They really need it prepackaged. And that carries not just because that's a traditional stance, but because also it's a time-to-market pressure right now like it's never been before.
All right, well, that's all we have time for today. So thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. You can follow Michael as well as TBR on Twitter at the handles listed here. And please check out our pages on SlideShare and YouTube as well to view our previous presentations. Additionally, before you sign off, we'd like to ask you to take a very brief survey. We're always looking to improve the information we share with you and how we share it. So your feedback would be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, we'll leave the chat function open for another minute or two, people to send in last-minute questions. And otherwise, thank you for joining today's session, and have a great afternoon.